How to find research gaps. Step-by-step guide. Research gap. A research gap, also termed as literature gap, is a problem which is unexplored or underexplored areas of the existing research. Selecting a topic, research or subject that has not been answered or explored yet is termed as research gap. It is a topic or area for which missing or inadequate information limits the ability of reviewers to reach a conclusion for a given question. 7 types of research gap. Number 1 is evidence gap, number 2 is knowledge gap, number 3 is practical knowledge gap, number 4 is methodology gap, number 5 is empirical gap, number 6 is theoretical gap, and number 7 is population gap. Number 1 is evidence gap. An evidence gap occurs with a provocative exception arises if a new research finding contradicts widely accepted conclusions. This gap involves contradictions in the findings of the prior research. It occurs if results from studies allow for conclusions in their own right, but are contradictory when examined from a more abstract point of view. The identification of contradictory evidence starts with analyzing each research stream. Subsequently, the results from these analyses need to be synthesized in order to reveal contradictory evidence. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Number 2 is knowledge gap. The knowledge gap is a common gap in the prior research. There are 2 settings where a knowledge gap, knowledge void, might occur. First, knowledge may not exist in the actual field to theories and literature from related research domains. Second, it might be the case that results of a study differs from what was expected. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Numbers 3 is practical knowledge gap. This kind of gap tends to be a discrepancy that can motivate new research in this direction. A practical knowledge, action knowledge, conflict arises when the actual behavior of professionals is different from their advocated behavior. In this case, research could seek to determine the scope of the conflict and to uncover the reasons for its existence. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Number 4 is methodological gap. A methodological gap is the type of gap that deals with the conflict that occurs due to the influence of methodology on research results. This gap addresses the conflicts with the research methods in the prior studies and offers a new line of research that is divergent from those research methods. It is noted that it might be useful to vary research methods, especially if certain research topics have been mainly explored using a singular or common method. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Number 5 is empirical gap. An empirical gap is the type of gap that deals with gaps in the prior research. This conflict deals with the research findings or propositions need to be evaluated or empirically verified. For example, the empirical gap often addresses conflicts that no study to date has directly attempted to evaluate a subject or topic from an empirical approach. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Number 6 is theoretical gap. The theoretical gap is the type of gap that deals with the gaps in theory with the prior research. For example, if one phenomenon is being explained through various theoretical models, similar to a methodological gap conflict, there might be a theoretical conflict. Researchers and scholars could examine whether one of those theories is superior in terms of the gap in the prior research. Theoretical gaps are a common occurrence in examining prior research on a phenomenon. Müller-Bloch and Kranz, 2014. Number 7 is population gap. A population gap is a common gap recognized among researchers. There are always underserved populations that have been under-researched. This gap is the type of research regarding the population that is not adequately represented or under-researched in the evidence base or prior research. for example, gender, race, ethnicity, age and ethic. Robinson, et al., 2011. Definition of 7 types of research gaps are given in table just for reminder. Writing up the research gaps, evidence gap, and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Knowledge gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Practical knowledge gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Methodological gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Empirical gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Theoretical gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. Population gap and look at strategy example and write up. Here you can see some sentences with blank spaces in which you can fit words related to your study. How to find research gaps in research article. Here you can see the research gap which is bordered with red color, in which the authors of article stated that a major limitation of our study was that other mutations conferring drug resistance were not analyzed as only partial fragment of NA gene fragment IV as per WHO protocol was sequenced, which covered only 726 and 1346 nucleotide positions, and resistant case could not be confirmed by NA star. It is important tip to note that if you find research gap in research article, then press Ctrl and F button and write words to search separately such as major or limitation or not analyzed. So in this way you can find research gap in very less time. Kindly subscribe my YouTube channel Thesis Helper. Thanks for watching.